Welcome in Rose City to Soccer Made in Portland. I'm Ryan Clark, joined today by a special guest co-host, Alex Barnes of Stumptown Footy. Welcome to the show, filling in for the illustrious Chris Reifer, who, sometimes, occasionally, likes to do his real job. So he's out there, grinding away, fighting for justice in the community. And Alex is here to talk some footy bright and early this morning. So Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. We'll give Chris a little bit of a reprieve from the soccer this week.
Yeah, he's put in a lot of minutes this season, so it's important to give him rest. It's a big stretch coming up here for both of these teams. You got the Timbers and the Thorns now sort of in this playoff hunt. The Timbers in a position to be able to clinch a postseason berth on Saturday with a win in Montreal, or a loss or a tie. We can get into that a little bit later on the scenarios. The Thorns trying to get the Shield. They're in a spot now where they're in second in NWSL behind San Diego after a loss on Saturday. So that's a tough position for them to be in when they were sort of, in control of their own destiny. And we'll get into that more later as well. Tom Bogert reporting this morning. We'll start out with some breaking news that the Timbers are down to the final list of 6 or 7 candidates for their head coaching position. That list includes Phil Neville, Dome Torrent, Ezra Hendrickson, and Robin Fraser, along with interim head coach Miles Joseph, who Tom noted is absolutely in contention based on the team's recent play and the sort of turnaround that the Timbers have experienced in this part of the season since they let go Gio Savarese. But Miles has not interviewed formally yet. They're waiting until the end of the season, according to Tom's reporting, to do the official interviewing. So there's a lot of layers to that list. Some interesting names, some potentially questionable ones based on team performance, based on public scrutiny and controversy. Alex, what stands out to you about that list of potential candidates for the Timbers head coaching job?
The first thing that stands out to me is that I'm glad that they're giving Miles consideration for the job after the work that he's put in during this stretch after Gio was let go. I think based on results, he deserves to be in the running. And if they make the playoffs, I think, aside from Robin Fraser on that list, I don't think there's any names that really stick out to me, especially Phil Neville.
Yeah, look, there's some baggage to unpack with Phil Neville, and honestly, for a team that has sort of tried to make this public turn away from controversy and issues in the past that the team has brought on itself. That's a surprising name to see on there because obviously folks who may not be familiar, Phil Neville was hired as the head coach of the England women a few years ago. And when he was hired, he came under public scrutiny for sexist tweets that he posted back in 2012. So he was hired at age 41, and at age 35, posted comments on Twitter that women were potentially too busy making breakfast or getting the kids ready or making the bed to read his tweets, and later joked about battering his wife publicly on Twitter in a conversation with family. So he apologized for those tweets, and there have been other soccer related scrutinies that have existed for Phil Neville that make that, I think, a surprise name to see on the list, a big name to be sure, somebody who has possessed some high level jobs in the soccer sphere, and most recently was the coach of Inter Miami. Had a bit of a contentious relationship with the media when he was there in Miami, so a lot to unpack with that name, but also Dome Torrent, Ezra Hendrickson. Robin Fraser is the one that you touched on, Alex, and somebody that I think would absolutely be among the top contenders, and according to Tom's reporting, he's somebody that's widely respected around the league. Was basically in a no-win scenario in Colorado with not a whole lot of resources to work with. But somebody that, people around the league have a lot of respect for. You think about, the way that people around the league talk about Gio Savarese, despite whatever, culture issues existed at the end of his tenure in Portland and, the results that didn't work out. People talk about Robin Fraser in sort of a similar light, somebody who's a longtime MLS guy who has those connections, but also the respect as somebody who, has shown themselves in a public manner to be a high character individual. So that's interesting to me to see him on that list in particular. And I also agree with your point, Alex, about Miles. I think that, there's no question he should have been on this list, and it's I think for Timbers fans, it will be refreshing to sort of see him listed because they're loving what they see. People online, in the emotions of the moment, as they so often get caught up, they have already called for Miles to get the job, or even Liam Ridgewell, to get the job based on his performance as an assistant coach. What's interesting about that reporting from Tom is that both of those individuals were named, Miles and Ridgie, as potential people to stay on the staff regardless of who gets hired. And I think that, if you really don't feel like you want to keep rolling with Miles Joseph and he's willing to stick around, I think you absolutely should consider that course of action, particularly if somebody like Robin Fraser ends up being your pick, because that adding another, thinking head in the room, somebody who, has that experience and, brings a lot to the table is always a good thing. And I think that this coaching staff has sort of led by committee in a lot of ways. Miles is I think a good leader and somebody who was willing and able to step into the top job. But I think that by no means is it sort of his, net cast across this entire team. I think it's absolutely a group effort on the part of people like him, Ridgie, Shannon Murray, and others on staff. So a continuation of that type of culture around the team could theoretically happen if they hire somebody else. The question is, who is that person, and would they be willing to sort of keep Miles and Ridgie and others on?
Yeah. And, obviously if you're bringing a new head coach in, you want them to have all of the staff that they want first and foremost. But if a Robin Fraser is comfortable with having a guy like Miles, like Ridgie, who have experience in the league, who are getting results right now, who players like, Zach McGraw and Dario Zuparic have spoken very highly of as having a real impact on not only results, but the way that the team is approaching games and approaching things like defending and accountability. I think it would be great to keep Miles on if that's something he's interested in. And yeah, like going back to Robin Fraser too, touching on the lack of resources in Colorado, that didn't stop him from getting results and significant results in quite a few seasons. He made the playoffs several years and finished first in the Western Conference in 2021 with a Colorado roster that not many people thought could do that. So, he's probably the only player or coach on that list that stands out to me aside from Miles at this point.
Yeah, there are big names on this list, and the Timbers had spoken privately sort of about, the potential for big names. And that's, that can be bluster. We know that type of thing happens all the time and in the process of hiring coaches. But Dome Torrent is somebody that comes to mind as a big name, but who knows how far along in the process he might get. He I believe most recently managed the Turkish club Galatasaray, which is a big power in Europe, and is consistently competing in Champions League. He's worked in MLS before as the head coach of New York City FC in 18 and 19. Was an assistant under Pep Guardiola. which is no small thing. One of the most successful coaches in the game, period. So to learn from and have a coaching tree connected to somebody like that obviously makes somebody incredibly qualified to potentially be the coach. Ezra Hendrickson is another name that was on the list. That's one that I'm not sure would compete with the likes of others on the list, but he brings his own sort of experience to the job, and somebody that's been around MLS for a while. Sounders assistant for several years, Galaxy assistant, Columbus Crew assistant, and then most recently the head coach of the Chicago Fire, who, talk about limited resources. Not a whole lot of resources for him in Chicago. But another guy with a lot of respect around the league too. And it's no small thing to look at this list and see the diversity of potential coaching hires, right? Like multiple people of color on this list. And that's, I think, a good thing in terms of the progress. Now, teams will tout that they interviewed people of diverse backgrounds as sort of this, self pat on the back, but what really ultimately matters if you're sort of pursuing that line of thinking is actually hiring these people and bringing them in and listening to their perspectives and not doing it just sort of as this token decision, but rather with an eye toward, progress. And we'll see if that ends up coming to pass and those candidates of diverse backgrounds end up making it farther in this process, but something to keep an eye on in terms of a narrative there. There are multiple Black players on the Timbers who, I'm sure would advocate for, a diverse hire and somebody that can advance sort of the role of Black people in MLS. And, Robin Fraser and Ezra Hendrickson are two guys that absolutely would do that. Miles, still think he is the leader in the clubhouse for this based on the team's performance. I would be surprised if they did not make the playoffs. It would take them, well, at least they'll make the play in. I should clarify that, because if Chris Reifer was here, he'd be like, well, actually, the play in is not the playoffs. And that's not how Chris sounds, but I'm just sort of turning him into this little like internet monster.
Throwing Chris under the bus there.
Well, he's not here, so he can't defend himself. Miles is somebody that has done a good job, and they are in a position now where, 1 point or 0 points would put them in a perilous situation. If they ended up out of these last two games with 1 or 0, they would probably not make the postseason. But anything else, literally a win, loss, or tie on Saturday against Montreal, they still have a chance to make the postseason. A win guarantees it, though. And avoiding the play-in is obviously their preference, and if they win out, they will. If they beat Montreal and they beat Houston on decision day, that would secure them a 7 spot in the playoffs. And whoever they face as the 2 seed remains to be seen. Right now, it would be Seattle. That would be interesting in a 3-game series going back and forth between Seattle. But playoff scenarios right now are myriad for the Portland Timbers. It's pretty much impossible to predict not only where they're going to end up, but who they'll play. The most likely scenario for them, according to the modeling, is to finish as the 8th seed. I think that's like a 40-something% chance of them to end up there. That would mean hosting the play-in game, which is just a one-off game for them to decide, who would play St. Louis, which, if I'm being honest, I think that, there's a real solid chance that they could pull the upset against a team like St. Louis. I think that Portland matches up pretty well with St. Louis City, despite the historic nature of their ascent in MLS. So we'll see. It's anybody's ball game at this point with 2 games to go, and it's not 100% clear where they're going to end up. But, what are your thoughts on the scenarios and sort of the path ahead for Portland?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'm relatively confident in is them getting a result against Montreal this weekend. Montreal has taken 2 points from their last 4 games, and Atlanta hung 4 goals on them. They lost 3-0. Another match against Orlando. And despite them getting a extremely late equalizer against Houston, I just think with the Timbers' recent home form, they should at least get a draw. And, I'd be pretty upset if they didn't at least get a draw from that game. I agree with your point on if they do get the 8th seed and match up with St. Louis, I think there's potential for an upset there. St. Louis has been good this season, but the Timbers drew the season series with them. They won 2-1 against them on April 29th, and then they obviously lost 2-1 March 11th at home. So, the MLS playoffs are weird, baby. Anything can happen. We've seen it multiple times. The Timbers come in as a lower seed and make a deep run. So, yeah, I think that I'm confident they'll get a result and get into the playoffs this weekend, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, and there's history too of expansion teams overperforming in their first year, as some people have criticized St. Louis of doing. Look, they're a good team. They've shown themselves to be a team that can make a deep run in the MLS Cup playoffs. But once you get to the playoffs, a lot of people around MLS know this, and true sickos who followed the league for as long as you have, Alex. Like they have seen teams, win the Supporters Shield or finish with the best record in their conference and just putter out in the playoffs. LAFC being an example a couple of years ago. Real Salt Lake's done it. Colorado's done it. I mean, these are real things. And the form that the Timbers are in really sort of helps that potential narrative.
Yeah. Speaking of Robin Fraser in Colorado, finishing first in the West and going out in the quarterfinals. But the last time the Timbers were in the playoffs or the MLS Cup was 2021, and can't remember what seed they were that year, but I'm pretty sure it was a lower seed. I just think that MLS playoffs are so weird. You can't really expect the unexpected is what I would say.
That's a good sales line. You should work for Garber on that one. That'd be a good one. So Timbers, obviously they play Montreal on Saturday on the road. That's at 4:30 on Apple TV. It's a free game, the last one of the season, because it's the playoffs ain't going to be free, folks. You're going to have MLS season pass if you want to watch the playoffs. And that last game against Houston is 2 weeks after. So decision day is October 21st against Houston at 6 p.m. at Providence Park. That game is obviously crucial because everything is so wound tight in MLS. But thinking about the scenarios for the Timbers, a win on Saturday and a loss or tie for San Jose, if I'm remembering correctly, would guarantee Portland at least the 8th seed. So they would be in a position where at the absolute worst, they would host the play-in game and then get to play St. Louis. I think, if I'm Portland, I would rather have that set up than to be the 7 seed and play a Seattle or an LAFC in a 3-game series without having to deal with the play-in. Yes, anything can happen in the play-in. You could just as easily be eliminated and not even get your shot at St. Louis as you could, getting that chance. But I don't know. I kind of like that path a little bit better.
Yeah, the only counter argument I would have to that is, the Timbers have a pretty favorable history against Seattle in the playoffs, as many Timbers fans like myself like to tout. But
yes,
yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you that, with St. Louis being an expansion team and maybe overperforming, we really don't know what Miles and the staff are thinking in terms. I'm sure they're just getting the playoffs. They would love home.
And then figure it out after. Yeah. So we'll see how it goes for the Timbers. The Thorns play this weekend at home in a big one against Gotham. Had a rough result last week, 2-0 loss to San Diego. Slipped to second in the standings because of that. It was essentially a battle for first place. San Diego put together, I think, one of their strongest performances of the season. Now, San Diego has been one of the inconsistent teams in NWSL, despite being atop the table right now. You could probably say the same about the Thorns in some respect. By their standards, at least, they have been pretty inconsistent this season. But, a 2-0 loss at home, even without Sophia Smith, which, as we know, is a massive, hole to fill up top. And Hannah Betford, who had been in good form earlier this season, didn't really have that strong of a performance in this game. So you wonder whether the Thorns will go to somebody like Christine Sinclair up top the way that they did against the Reign, see if that sort of combo fits a little better with what they want to do against Gotham. But this is a formidable Gotham team coming into town on Saturday. A lot of layers to it, a lot of emotion. Obviously, Mana Shim and Sinead Farley are playing their first games with Gotham in Portland. It's really a important moment for the both of them. I had a chance to speak with them this week about the emotions and the fact that, despite everything they went through, with the Paul Riley situation, with the league's investigations, Portland's mishandling and attempts to interfere with those investigations, it's a situation now where they're able to play with joy. They're able to have passion for and love the game again. And Thorns fans love and care for these two women and have supported them consistently over the last 2 years as they sort of have been on the front lines of this fight for equity. So it's special in a lot of ways. And it reminds me sort of a couple weeks ago when Rapinoe came to town, and special for different reasons, obviously. But, the idea that, we're in the heat of a playoff race, that, obviously the Thorns fans want the Thorns to get 3 points out of this game, but that, players keep coming into town that they, recognize and respect and love. I think it says a lot about the NWSL as a community, and particularly about Portland Thorns fans who have been such consistent and outspoken advocates for the players. So, that will be a nice moment or series of moments, depending on how the game plays out, who gets subbed in. But, on the field, this is a matchup against a Gotham team that has a lot of talent up top. You think about Lynn Williams and Yasmin Ryan, a former Thorn, and others up there who they like to play with some serious pace, and you have to defend out wide very well. I think that's something that, Megan Klingenberg and Natalia Queek are two veteran players who have done a great job this season, and both, take care of their bodies very well and have sort of been, iron women for this team this season and not dealt with a whole lot of injuries. But the pace of the game has sometimes gotten away from them on the edges of the field, particularly earlier in the year before the Thorns switched to sort of a double pivot defensively. Those two were often left in precarious situations, including, I remember the Spirit game when the Thorns lost, or excuse me, the Thorns won that game. But, one of the challenges of that game was Trinity Rodman on the wing against Klingenberg. And Kling is an outstanding player and vocal leader, but she could face similar issues defending in space this week. And it's going to take quality defending on the interior from people like Becky Sauerbrunn, who's really back fully healthy at this point. Kelly Hubley or Emily Menges next to her. That's the end of the field that I think is going to end up making the difference. I think that the Thorns had an off game on the attack last time out, and I think that people like Morgan Weaver and Crystal Dunn are going to, sort of step back into those roles and convert more likely this weekend than they did at all last weekend. So a lot of layers to this one. What for you Alex, do you have your sort of eyes on for this Thorns matchup?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on Weaver and Dunn. I think there were some uncharacteristic, wasteful moments in attack, especially in that second half. And then, going back to the dangers that Gotham pose moving forward, I think it's really imperative that the Thorns don't shoot themselves in the foot like they did against the Wave in the first half. I think both the goals came from giveaways in midfield. And then the second one, obviously, Bella misjudges it, and it's an unfortunate moment. But, like you said, Gotham is a very dangerous team moving forward. The fullbacks, the center backs, the defensive midfielders are going to have their hands full. And one thing that, is imperative, if there's still hope that they can get the Shield, but San Diego's got to drop points. But regardless of that, the Thorns have to pick up some wins here if they want to secure a bye in the first round of the playoffs and also potentially win the Shield still. So.
Yeah, and as Chris and I have talked about, week after week, that's the goal for this group, right? Is to be the first team in NWSL history, not just the first Thorns team to not only win the Shield, but to win the championship on top of that. And that would be a big moment for this club, and something that they can hang their hat on as sort of a high mark of the dynasty. Really, you think about this Thorns team has an opportunity to establish a dynasty here. I believe there will be some turnover in the offseason. Some veteran players may not be back here. And this is sort of the end of this portion of the window, right? I think the window extends however long Sophia Smith and Sam Coffey and Morgan Weaver and Bella Bixby and others, stick around town. Especially people like Sophia Smith, who, Chris has continued to advocate for them getting in that room and having her sign on the dotted line to a massive extension. That's a no-brainer. We've talked about that extensively. You gotta lock up somebody like Soph. She's a generation.
Give her the keys to the city.
Yeah, she deserves the keys to the city and to the suburbs too. Give her the keys to like Beaverton and Hillsborough.
Cross the bridge in Vancouver.
Forest Grove. Yeah, head up to Vancouver, the finest city to the north of Portland that I can think of. Look, this is a dynasty defining stretch, as we've said time and again for the Thorns. They aren't necessarily thinking in those terms. They are very narrowly focused on this Gotham game. And, Mike Norris, the first season for him, he's admitted has gone by in a flash. And there have been growing moments for him as a coach. And now this is the ultimate test, right? Is to put Portland in a position to maybe catch San Diego. A win, obviously, is the thing that you need to sort of put yourself in a strong position there. A win and a San Diego loss puts you back up above them. And a tie and a San Diego loss actually would put them in a tie atop the table. But despite the recent result, the Thorns would have that tiebreaker because of a massive advantage in goal differential. And that could end up being, again, the thing that makes the difference in the end for the Thorns. They have right now a plus 13 goal differential. San Diego's plus 7. It would take a lot of movement for that to happen. And even if that movement did happen, the Thorns wouldn't be in a tied situation anyway. So a lot to unpack for the final week of the season. The Thorns actually, they haven't clinched a playoff spot yet, which is truly the example of how insane the NWSL is, right? That, the team that is the reigning champions, that is consistently in line for the Shield, that has far and away the best goal differential, with 2 games to go in the season, is still not clinched. There is an outside shot that if the Thorns lose out and other things happen around them, that they miss the playoffs, which of course would be disastrous. But all the modeling shows they're going to make the playoffs. It's like 100% chance, statistically at this point. Them getting 0 points out of these final 2 games would be a shocker of epic proportions. And the entire conversation shifts away from, dynasty establishment to to uncertain future, right? We love narratives in this business, and that would be an unfortunate narrative to have to talk about. But I don't think that's going to happen, frankly.
No.
I think that the Thorns at the very least are going to get, 3 or 4 points out of this final 2 games. The question becomes whether they can get that top 2 seed and potentially the Shield. In order to clinch a top 2 seed this weekend, the Thorns need to win against Gotham. North Carolina needs to draw or lose, and the Washington Spirit need to draw or lose. Those 3 things happen. The Thorns have set themselves up with 1 home game to decide whether they get to go down to San Diego for that championship. And maybe that championship is against the host team, against the Wave, who, in that scenario, very well might be the number 1 seed and host their own semifinal game against whoever comes out of that side of the bracket. That would be compelling. It would be tougher because, the NWSL would make an effort to sort of sell tickets as evenly as they possibly can, but it's still in San Diego. There would still be a whole heck of a lot of Wave fans who, have shown up in droves this season, and their average attendance rivals Portland's, which is incredible for a team that's only been around as long as they have and sort of hasn't had that long established fan culture that the Thorns have. That would be an intriguing matchup. I would love that. I would also love to see Rapinoe and OL Reign in that championship match.
Speaking
if I'm the
narratives.
Thorns, because not only, narratives, man, the rivalry, the last season for Rapinoe, potentially her last professional soccer match for club or country could be that championship matchup, or a playoff matchup in Portland, depending on how the seeds shake out. So many fun narratives in NWSL. And as the league expands, the talent pool will spread out, and I think the parity will continue, but I think there's an opportunity for teams like the Thorns to separate themselves in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, a lot of things to touch on there, but this weekend is sort of the big focus.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that Thorns fans or players should be rooting for a North Carolina loss, because they play San Diego tomorrow at home, and if San Diego drops points to them and the Thorns get a result against Gotham, that puts them back in the driver's seat for the supporter shield. So, it's a crazy weekend. That's why the NWSL is so great. There's so much parity across the league between, there's so many good teams. And the fact that the Thorns could, potentially miss the playoffs with how well they've played at times this season, how much talent's on that roster would be just insane. But like you said, I don't think that's going to happen. And it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend and beyond, for sure.
Yeah, and Sophia Smith's health is an underlying narrative of these next couple of weeks for the Thorns. I was out at training yesterday. Today is Friday, so I was out there on Thursday. Soph trained in full. She was a participant in everything, full go. I wouldn't say she was going 100% in terms of, the intensity of her training. She obviously wants to be careful to not re-injure herself, but I think that's also a sign that she also may not be all the way there yet to be ready to play. It is notable, I think, though, that she trained in full, that she had this sort of brace wrap thing around her right leg that, supported that right knee, that she had the sprained MCL. She stayed after practice to get some extra touches, some shots off. Most of her shots, I should note, throughout the day of training were sort of a little off. Rust is inevitable when you've been off as long as she has. But she's doing opposed work. She's being defended by others and going through everything, which makes me think there is a possibility that she is available as a substitute this weekend. I don't think that they're going to rush her back by any means, and I would be just as unsurprised if she was off the team entirely and they sort of save her for that Angel City game, or if the results go their way, they save her for the playoffs. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think obviously, everybody in Portland is desperate to see Sophia Smith back on the pitch, but you do not want a re-aggravation of that injury. And as much as they miss her, I think Morgan Weaver has been incredible over the summer. I think she's on 7 goals now, right? Something like that. So, they have the attacking talent still without her to get results. And you just want to make sure that she's 100% ready to come back when that happens.
Yeah. And she could be the difference between you winning the championship and not, right? And when it comes to the playoffs, she's a game breaker. She's unbelievably fast and skilled and highly competitive and talented. All the superlatives that you want to talk about with Soph. I think that regardless of whether she comes back in the regular season, I think she's the MVP. I think there are other players who have made strong cases around NWSL this season, but just looking at the numbers, not only has she continued to lead the league in scoring, but if it weren't for Sam Coffey, her own teammate, being a brilliant playmaker, she'd be potentially leading the league in assists too. That is such a major expansion of her game for somebody that has been an out and out striker, that is someone who loves to dominate the ball and take it herself, like 1-on-3, 1-on-4, 1-on-5, and just rip off some insane goals. Becoming a distributor and utilizing that talent around her has been such an evolution. And Thorns fans and fans of the NWSL in general may have sort of forgotten about that dominance. I don't think Thorns fans have forgotten about it, but definitely NWSL fans in general may have allowed it to slip into the background in the last few weeks since she's been out. But you gotta take the season on the whole when you're looking at an award like that. I think that, you're right to give praise to Morgan Weaver. I think she is somebody that, if she was not on a team with Sophia Smith, would be among the leaders for league MVP right now. She has, experienced this evolution as a player over the last 2 years. I think she's the same player she was last year, but it's just taken another step in that sort of competitive dominance. And she is representative, I think, of this Thorns culture, just this ability to play with equal parts joy and just relentless competitive intensity. I mean, not only the fact that she gets excited and is emotional and screams when she scores goals and points to the logo on her chest, but she literally is such an intense and consistent player between the lines, somebody constantly providing pressure up top, utilizing her speed on the wings, finishing with just, tremendous finishing ability. She's really underrated, honestly. I think that, if she was on any other team, there'd be a lot more hype around her, and she might even be getting more national team looks than she has. So, I have a lot of, positive things to say about Morgan. I think she's been terrific.
Yeah, it's been really special to watch her progression this season and adding that more clinical nature to her play up top. She's got pace to burn. She sets up teammates. And then, like you said, without Sophia Smith, she's maybe the most important attacker on the team. But speaking of Sophia Smith, she is the MVP again. And if she wins back-to-back MVPs and the Thorns win back-to-back titles and potentially the Supporters Shield, it would be just such a special season, and cementing themselves as a dynasty team.
Yeah, and the NWSL is growing in so many different ways. And, you think about team valuations spiking. I mean, that Sportico article, take it for what it is, but Angel City being valued at $180 million and the Thorns being essentially like a third of that, or like a fourth of that, at like $54 million. That is a big deal that the league is growing in that way. And the Thorns,
huge for the league.
Yeah, and it's huge for the league. And in order for the Thorns to sort of keep up with the competition, they aren't in a market like Los Angeles. They aren't in a market like Boston that is getting an expansion team. or even like the Bay Area that has this major institutional support, these like financial firms throwing hundreds of millions of dollars into the mix here. It's going to be different regardless of who the new owners are, right? Unless the new owner is like Phil Knight or something. Like the pockets only run so deep, even if you have a billionaire at the top of your organization, because it's Portland. And so that's always going to be a sort of limitation that they face, despite the history, the fan culture, the success. They have to sort of fight that uphill battle from here on out. That's part of the growth of the league. And so establishing this dynasty, establishing this tradition of a strong culture within the team itself, a strong history of winning and standard and being a globally recognized brand. These are all things that they want to do, and it starts with this season. And that establishing that can allow you to compete on a level playing field in the future, in the next decade, as teams like Angel City are going to start paying big dollars and bringing in a whole bunch of talent to compete with you on the field. There's a lot of great players in leagues around the world that have not yet touched down in NWSL. There's a ton of talent, and I think NWSL is proving itself to be one of the best leagues in the world, if not the best. But it can get better, and I think will get better. So you got to keep up in some way, and I think that establishing this dynasty is a good sort of pathway to doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's get Phil Knight to buy the Thorns and then the Blazers, and then we'll all be rich and happy and win everything.
I mean, we won't be rich, but
well, that's true.
Yeah, we will continue to fight the good fight on the middle class front. So finishing with a labor discussion today. That's usually how this podcast goes. We veer into topics unrelated to soccer, particularly sort of hot button.
Got to fight the powers that be. Indeed.
That will finish it up for us today on Soccer Made in Portland. We will finish with a message that the workers must fight for their rights. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you to Alex for joining us. We really appreciate having you on, man.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm down to do it anytime.
Absolutely. We'll have you back for sure. And, you can follow us on Twitter, at A Barnes and Noble, at Ryan T. Clark, and at Stumptown Footy, and at Soccer Made in PDX. That's all of them, right? I think I checked them all off there, but
yeah, I think you got them.
Yeah, all set. So, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, like us, subscribe to us, leave a review. Tell Alex what he did wrong. Don't tell me what I did wrong. I know that I was totally flawless.
I'm too fragile. Don't tell me.
You can't take criticism. So thanks again, Alex. Looking forward to the next game. We'll share a beer in the post game press box and trudge along as the season continues for both the Portland Timbers and Thorns. We'll see you next week, everybody, and thanks for joining us.